The elevator to floor 21. Have you ever stepped into an elevator, looked at the panel, and seen a floor that you are sure was never there before? The story I'm about to tell you came from a former night guard I used to work with. He only lasted 3 months in that building. What made him quit was something he saw on the elevator CCTV, and a floor no one had ever heard of. He asked me not to use his real name. So I'll just call him Lee. Lee worked the night shift in a mid-rise office and residential building. 20 floors. Nothing fancy, nothing high-end. Just one of those places that look almost identical in every big city. During the day, it was noisy and crowded. At night, it was almost too quiet. There were 2 elevators. They were old, but still worked fine, at least on paper. From his very first week on the job, Lee noticed something odd. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., one of the elevators would often stop on the 18th floor and just stay there. No doors opening. No one getting in or out. Just the digital display holding on 18 for 10, sometimes 15 minutes at a time. But according to the building records, the 18th floor was empty. No tenants. No businesses. Just unused units waiting to be renovated. Lee shrugged it off as a glitch. Old elevator, old system, lazy maintenance. He had seen worse. That changed a few weeks later. It was a Tuesday night, around 3 in the morning, when the front desk phone rang. On the other end was a man from the 19th floor. His voice was low and annoyed. "Hey, can you guys keep it down on 18, he said. "Somebody's been pacing back and forth for like 20 minutes. I have a big meeting tomorrow." Lee frowned. He looked at the screen in front of him, the corridor camera for the 18th floor. The hallway was completely dark. No motion, no open doors, nothing. He checked the digital logs. No one had badged into the 18th floor. No elevator stop was recorded there in the last half hour. Still, he had to follow procedure. He grabbed his flashlight and radio, headed to the elevator, and hit the button. When the doors opened on the ground floor, he stepped in and looked up at the panel. 1 to 20. Every button dark. He pressed 18. Nothing happened. The button didn't light up. For a moment he just stared, then pressed it again, a little harder. Still nothing. Then, after a 2-second pause, the elevator lit up 19 by itself and started moving. When the doors opened, the 19th floor was dim and quiet. Only a few of the wall lamps were on. The man who had called was waiting at his door in a t-shirt, arms crossed, looking tired. "You guys done?" he asked. Whatever they were dragging around down there finally stopped. Lee glanced at the ceiling, toward the empty 18th floor above, and felt a small knot form in his stomach. "I just came up from the lobby," he said slowly. "Nobody's on 18. And the system says the elevator hasn't stopped there all night." The man's face changed for a moment, like he wanted to ask something else, but decided not to. He just muttered, "Whatever," and shut his door. That week, Lee got 2 more similar complaints. Always from the 19th floor. Always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always about footsteps, dragging noises, chairs scraping on the floor, from an empty level beneath them. And every time, the building system insisted. No activity on 18th floor. The night everything unraveled, Lee had a cup of instant noodles steaming on the desk in front of him. It was a little past 2:40 a.m. The monitors washed his face in pale blue light. He watched the elevator cameras out of habit. It was a quiet night. Then one of the elevator feeds flickered. Just a tiny glitch. Half a second of static, but enough to catch his eye. When the picture came back, the cameras showed an empty elevator slowly going up. Lee glanced at the floor display in the corner of the screen. 12, 13, 14. He stopped chewing. The numbers kept climbing. 17, 18, 19, 20. Then, after a tiny hesitation, a number lit up that should not have been there. 21. Lee leaned closer to the screen. His heart skipped a beat. There was no 21st floor in this building. There had never been a 21st floor. The panel in the lobby, the building blueprints, everything ended at 20. But right there, on the CCTV feed, the elevator display clearly showed 21 glowing faintly. A little dimmer, a little yellower, like an old light bulb compared to the others. The elevator slowed. Lee watched as the doors began to open. What he saw outside did not match any floor he recognized. There were no corridor lights. The hallway beyond the doors was completely dark. A thick kind of darkness that swallowed the reflection of the camera. For a second, nothing moved. Then, just at the bottom edge of the frame, something shifted. It looked like the tip of a shoe, stopping right at the threshold, just inside the doorway. He couldn't see a leg, or a body, or a face. Just the edge of something that didn't belong there. The image warped for a moment, as if someone had pressed fast forward on a tape. The door seemed to jump closed. The number 21 blinked once, then rolled all the way back down to 1. The elevator stopped on the ground floor. The doors opened to an empty lobby. Lee rewound the footage. He watched the same sequence 3, 4, 5 times. The strange extra floor. The dark hallway. The single unmoving shadow at the door. The next morning, he took a copy of the video to the property manager. The manager watched it with a blank expression, jaw tight. When it finished, he sighed and said, "Probably just a corrupted file. Delete it from the system. And don't mention this to the tenants, okay? We don't need rumors." The file, as far as official records were concerned, never existed. Lee tried to convince himself it was nothing. Electronics fail. Cameras glitch. Old buildings do weird things. But on his last night before quitting, the elevator gave him something that would not fit into any reasonable explanation. It was almost 5 in the morning. The sky outside was fading from black to dull gray. He decided to do one last full round of the building. He took the elevator from the lobby. This time, when he stepped in, the panel looked normal. 1 to 20, all dark. He hit 5. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. Just before it reached the 5th floor, the display glitched. For a split second, the 5 seemed to stretch, like it was trying to become 2 numbers at once. A 5, and something that looked disturbingly like 21 layered on top. Then the doors opened. The 5th floor hallway looked normal. Lights on. Dusty plants. Emergency exit signs glowing green. Lee stepped out, went about his routine, and slowly worked his way up the building, floor by floor. When he got back to the security room, the clock read 5:27 a.m. Before clocking anything in, he pulled up the last half hour of elevator footage. On the screen, he watched himself in the lobby, entering the elevator with his flashlight in hand. He watched the doors close. The elevator began to rise. The display changed from 1, to 2, to 3, to 4. Then, right where 5 should have been, the feed stuttered. The number that appeared on the screen was a distorted mess. Part 5, Part 2, and something that looked like 2 faint digits overlapping each other. The doors opened. But the hallway outside was not the one Lee remembered walking into. It was dark. The camera's night mode kicked in, washing everything in grainy gray. There were no potted plants. No exit signs. Just a long corridor that seemed slightly too narrow, stretching further than any of the actual floors. On the screen, Lee walked out. The real Lee, sitting in the security room, felt his skin crawl. He did not remember any of this. He remembered bright lights, normal walls, nothing unusual. but in the recording, his own figure stepped into that dark corridor and vanished from view. The elevator doors closed. The number on the display flickered once more. For an instant, there it was again. 21. The feed glitched. Static filled the screen for about 2 seconds. When the picture returned, the elevator was back on the ground floor. Doors open. Completely empty. Lee paused the video. In the metal reflection of the elevator doors, there was a faint shape. Not his. Not anyone's, really. Just the outline of a head and shoulders, with no clear features, standing exactly where a person would stand if they were waiting to get in. He stared at that shape for a long time. The next day, he left his resignation letter on the manager's desk and never worked another night in that building. The building is still there. You can probably find similar listings online. Convenient location, affordable units, newly renovated lobby. The official documents still say it has 20 floors. No more. No less. But if you ever end up in a place like that, late at night, alone in an old elevator, take a second look at the panel. And if you ever see a floor number that does not match the building plan, would you press it? Or would you pretend you never saw it at all? This story is a work of fiction, created purely for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people, buildings, or events is purely coincidental.